Good morning, Lenore.
Morning, Brady.
Good morning, Patrick.
Morning, Brady.
I want to chat a bit about AI today. Many listeners may already be using it in their daily lives. A lot of people have been asked to use it in the workplace, but the government has some big decisions to make when it comes to how it's regulated. What is on the table at the moment?
Well, we know that AI is changing everything we do, for good and for bad. We can't hide from it. But the thing that's on the table right now is a bid by the tech companies to get an exemption from copyright law so that they can train their large language models on our intellectual property, on the IP of the media companies, the creatives, screenwriters, film producers, musicians. The tech bros argue that this would unlock billions of dollars of foreign investment in Australia. And earlier this year, the Productivity Commission said that this was something the government maybe should look at. They didn't specifically recommend it, but they thought that maybe we should have an exemption from copyright laws to allow this to happen. I don't know that I need to point this out to listeners, but if I do, it's theft. It's stealing. You could probably argue to international meat producers that they could come to Australia and steal cattle, just have them, take them. And that would probably unlock billions of dollars in meat processing facilities in Australia and investment. But the farmers would be pissed. And the Australian creatives and media industries are pissed. They're really, really angry at this idea that we could somehow legalise theft of their intellectual property. And what happened this week is that a bunch of those creatives, very well-known authors and musicians, went to a Senate inquiry to explain just why they are so angry and why they think this idea should not even pass go.
So this was discussed in a Senate inquiry on Tuesday, and there was actually some quite fierce questioning from Senator Hanson-Young and David Pocock.
And Senator Henderson was really strong.
Yeah, exactly, who is a former journalist and
Liberal Senator.
They really pressed the Productivity Commission on whether they'd done any modelling about the impact that text and data mining, which is a bit of a euphemism.
But that's the exemption.
That's the exemption to copyright law that it's called. They pressed them on whether they'd done any modelling about whether this would cause any damage to the creative industries, how much the creative industry was worth to the Australian economy. And eventually the Productivity Commission acknowledged that they hadn't done any modelling about what kind of impact this would have. And, the creative industries in Australia are worth a lot of money. We produce actually a lot of wealth through our creative industry outputs, films, books. They're worth a lot of money and they employ a lot of people as well. So it is pretty astounding that there was no actual impact modelling done on this, when on the other hand, you have the Productivity Commission in that report that they put out earlier this year saying that the productivity gains to unlocking AI would be somewhere between 5% and 13% of GDP increase over that time. So if they've done the modelling on one side, you would think they'd also have to do the modelling on the other side.
And it's interesting that the billions of dollars that they modelled on the potential productivity gains. There's this consultancy called Mandala, which was set up by former Labor advisors and a bloke who used to work with Andrew Charlton, the Assistant Labor Minister, in his consultancy Alpha Beta. And Andrew Charlton is an Assistant Minister who's very, very pro-AI. Another one is Andrew Lee, and for good reason, like AI could really benefit productivity. But this Mandala consultancy did a report for Microsoft, which is another strong advocate for AI, that came up with this figure that it could unlock $115 billion in economic value annually by 2030. And then they did a report for the Tech Council and it came up with the same figure. And then, wouldn't you believe it, Deirdre Chambers, the exact same number almost, was in the Productivity Commission report as the potential benefit for unlocking AI at the fastest possible pace. Now, the Productivity Commission at least had the good grace to say it was a back-of-the-envelope calculation and that with considerable uncertainty around the reasoning. And I'm not suggesting that there's anything untoward here, but I just think that consultancy and that figure has got a lot of airtime and a lot of play without a lot of scrutiny as to where that number came from and what the disbenefits or costs might be on the other side of the equation.
Also, the other thing about that Productivity Commission interim report was that not only did it didn't recommend, but they included a case study about and asked for discussion about this exemption for text and data mining. But they also said that there shouldn't be any extra regulation of AI, that there should be no kind of pause for high-risk use cases. There should be no specific regulation on AI, and then flag this other weakening of copyright. So, look, I think the Productivity Commission was sort of trying to backpedal in that hearing this week in Canberra and say, look, this wasn't a specific recommendation, but they've actually made some pretty strong recommendations about we don't need to regulate this sector. Any regulation will get in the way of the productivity gain that we will get from AI.
And the other thing I thought was interesting while we're sort of doubling down on the Productivity Commission is that they said that they had consulted with MasterCard, Microsoft, Meta, OpenAI, Xero, Deloitte. And what came out in the committee hearing is they hadn't consulted with any creative industries or any media organisations at all.
And places like APRA and, there's hundreds of
Screenwriters
Australian Australian authors would be quite happy to go and speak to them and have put in submissions.
To be fair, it was an interim report and they are consulting with them now. But I guess where this all sits is, on the one hand, the government is saying they have no plans to exempt AI from copyright law, which is what everyone's so concerned about. But we all know no plans in the present tense means they're trying to work out what they want to do. It's an open question. They don't know yet. And we know that the tech companies are lobbying like crazy, both here and all around the world, to try to drive a race to the bottom and get this exemption into laws in every country. So I think that's why the creative industries are coming back so hard right now, even though the government has not yet said it will do this, because they can see the direction of travel and they can see how hard the tech companies are lobbying to get this exemption and basically take our stuff.
I was really taken by the government's position on the supermarket duopoly, and when there was suggestions of breaking up the supermarkets, Albanese was pretty strong. He came out and said, we don't do stuff like this. This is not the Soviet Union. But what you're talking about with an exemption to copyright is basically large-scale appropriation of content and giving it to someone else. Property rights are pretty fundamental to, Western democracies. In the US, it used to be
economies.
Yeah. And in the US, life, liberty, and, pursuit of happiness, which was actually property originally. It's fundamental to the way that we work. And it is a kind of very radical position to just say we're going to get rid of copyright specifically for AI companies to just crawl all your content and use it how they see fit.
So what are the alternatives to taking our stuff? What are the creative industries and the media putting forward that could be useful instead of just a broad exemption in the copyright?
Look, it's really actually quite clear and simple.
Keep copyright.
Copyright's existed for a very long time. It's been successful in providing, money, incentives for creatives, for industries to create content that is consumed across the world. It works. We are part of international agreements around copyright that we can't just tear up and walk away from. There are ways that content can be licensed. For example, The Guardian and News Corp, among other companies, have licensing agreements with OpenAI and with other tech platforms to allow this use. So it's actually really simple, the alternative. It's maintain copyright and facilitate licensing agreements.
And either pay people for the use of it.
Pay people, yeah.
It's not that hard.
Do we know what these AI companies would look like if they weren't hoovering up all of our work? Like, what would they use if they weren't using creative work or the work of journalists?
If they had to rely on licensed content, they would just have to pay for it. And these companies have market caps of hundreds of billions of dollars. So they're not short of a buck. They can pay for it. I don't think if all of them were forced today or tomorrow to license content and pay for it, you would see any change in the output of these, large language models. I just don't think it would have a material impact. What it would have an impact on is the funders, that they're not going to get these absolutely obscene returns on investment.
I mean, but if you looked at the counterfactual, if they were allowed to just steal all our IP and use it to try and to create kind of versions of what we do, to undercut what we do with some sort of minced up, chewed up AI version of it, then in the short term, they would be a lot richer, creative industries would be a lot poorer. But it also feels to me, and maybe I don't understand it well enough, but it feels incredibly short-sighted, because it seems like they are going to need the ongoing creation of quality intellectual and creative content to continue to fund these large language models going forward. And if they absolutely decimate the creative industries, it's going to kind of ultimately do them in the eye as well, it would seem to me. And I just don't understand why any government or anyone would want to suck the funding out of the most impactful, creative, meaningful things that humans can do in terms of creativity. It's baffling.
You mentioned before that the Australian government isn't the only government being lobbied by these tech companies on AI. How is this issue playing out internationally?
I mean, I think the tech companies are really just trying to find the weakest link and drive a race to the bottom. But I think they like to say in each country that country is out of step and every other country is doing it. And that's certainly Scott Farquharson, who's the co-founder of Atlassian, and he's also the chair of the Tech Council here, says that about Australia, that we are somehow out of step. Well, actually, this fight's going on everywhere. In the US, like Tech Central, there are, 50 cases before the courts. The New York Times filed a lawsuit against Microsoft and OpenAI, alleging that millions of its articles were used to create the chatbots that are now competing with them as a news outlet. Last November, a group of visual artists filed an amended copyright lawsuit against Stability AI, again alleging misuse of their work. Getty Images is in a fight with Stability AI in the UK as well. The German music rights company are also fighting OpenAI. And some of these lawsuits are succeeding. So the AI company Anthropic agreed to pay authors and publishers $1.5 billion in the largest copyright settlement in history. So, if you got an exemption, you wouldn't have to pay.
So what do the tech companies say the solution is?
Well, the tech companies like to point to basically an internet protocol called robots.txt, which they say is basically an opt-out.
Which reverses the onus in the first place. We'll steal your stuff unless you say don't. But anyway.
But the big problem with that is, A, it's not mandatory. A lot of places don't follow it. B, it's really complicated. So crawlers, when they come and so the way that AI models gather information is they have little robot crawlers that go out onto the internet and gather this data and pull it back to their servers. The instructions on robots.txt say you can look at this part of the website, you can't look at this part of the website. And sorry to any tech people out here because I'm probably mangling this horribly, but this is my understanding of it. And the problem with the news website is we actually need people to be able to see what we do, and we need search engines to be able to access it. So if we put up a news article and it's not on search, it doesn't really exist apart from the people who directly come and visit our homepage. So search is really important for news sites. If we got rid of robots.txt and just opted out for everything, it would also opt us out for crawlers for search engines as well, which would have a pretty big impact on traffic. It's not a solution in the way that the Tech Council and the tech companies suggest it is.
And I just also find the very idea kind of offensive, that the starting point is there is license to steal unless we implement some way to stop them from stealing.
I mean, it's just
backwards.
You just publish something and put it on the internet and then anybody owns it.
Yeah.
It's never been the case like that.
And it's not just traffic that would be impacted by us not being on search. It means that people looking for reliable, informed information through search, it makes it harder for them to get it if news outlets are opting out.
Exactly. And in a time of, where misinformation, fake news is a real concern, like the outcome of all of that would be terrible.
I mean, this also is only part of the problem. I mean, the outcome of keeping copyright would be that these big AI companies would need to pay us for the use of hoovering up our content. I mean, there's still going to then be the problem of AI overviews appearing when people search, which doesn't direct back to the source of the news in the first instance. Like even if we solve this copyright problem, AI is still a big problem for the continuation of news businesses as they have been before. But this is sort of like the starting hurdle problem.
It is in many ways an existential threat to a lot of media companies, the rise of AI. And, I think it's interesting that there's been a lot of lobbying from tech companies towards the government, I think you're going to see a very big pushback from creative industries against any of these proposals, and it's really only just getting started.
But it's not all doom and gloom, is it? Do we see opportunities for the way that AI could work in our industry?
Oh, there's definitely use cases for AI within journalism. We use it extensively. We've got very strict guidelines about how it can be used in the newsroom. So one thing it's really good at is going through very large reports or data sets and providing useful information. That's always obviously got to be checked by a journalist, and we would never publish anything directly from a large language model. But they do have use cases in research and in journalism as a whole, and they're getting better and better at doing things. So we're not, this is not an anti-AI position. They do have great promise. There's many applications, but, I don't think it's a radical position to say that, people should be paid for their content.
And their creative efforts. Pat's right. We will use AI in the newsroom. We are using AI in the newsroom to ingest information and sort through information. But I think listeners should know we will never, ever publish anything that has been generated by AI and hasn't involved a journalist. Journalists are, and human oversight and human ingenuity is always the source of our reporting.
And now it's time for what we can't get out of our heads this week. Lenore, what was that for you?
It is all our beautiful bird-related content because it's Bird of the Year time. Voting starts next week, and you have to vote every day for your favoured bird or it'll get knocked out of the competition. So this is one situation where you do need to vote early and vote often. We're also asking listeners and readers to make a short video of themselves endorsing their favourite bird, and if they want to, trying to mimic its call. I have done one for my favourite bird, the gang gang. I'm not sure if I'm going to regret that, but anyway, I did. Anyway, I hope listeners join in. Bird of the Year is super fun, and it's always about raising awareness of our beautiful birds.
You'll be able to find those videos on site, but they're also on Guardian Australia's Instagram, Guardian Australia's TikTok, and Guardian Australia's YouTube channel. And Lenore's Gang Gang is great. Patrick, what can't you get out of your head this week?
I'm also here for Bird Lovers Christmas, basically. I really loved a piece that was published on Thursday by one of our colleagues, Shadi Khan Saif, about coming from Afghanistan to Karachi as a teenage refugee and just being mesmerised by the budgerigars on sale in the markets there. And they are beautiful birds. I used to have a collection of them when I was a kid, and it really kind of took me back to just, falling in love with birds and everything great about.
What's your bird, Pat?
This year, I haven't decided yet. I've got to wait. I've got to wait for the list to come out. And
I always want to vote for the magpie, even though they're the bird that I'm most scared of. I'm very compelled by them.
Miles, our producer, what's your bird?
I'm a black cockatoo guy. I think there's a flock of black cockatoos that lives right behind my flat, and whenever I see them, I'm overcome with emotion about the precarity of our natural world.
Perfect. Everybody has a bird.
Oh, everyone! It's a great time on our website. The Bird of the Year. I've been loving it. Thank you so much for joining me this week, Lenore.
Thanks, Brady.
And thank you, Patrick.
Thanks, Brady.
Boom.